Hello, can you hear me? Good morning from New York.
Yes, we hear you clearly.
Wonderful. Thanks, Herman. Good to hear your voice. When I hear your voice, I know the international national accounts world is in order.
Yep. I see Aishan is also on the already signed in. So
Okay, wonderful. Thank
Hi,
you.
good
Hi
morning.
there. Hi,
Good
Sean. Good
morning. I
morning.
know it's a bit dark.
Yes, it's early in the Americas, but we are connecting to the whole world.
I don't think okay. It's not too bad, no? Okay, great.
You look very distinguished early in the morning.
I have to. Okay, let me just.
So, Herman, we have a lot of participants. I heard the numbers were staggering.
So we apparently 1,200 registrants. So we tried to bump them to a YouTube channel so that everybody can look at it. So that's good. So let's hopefully people would not have problems with the WebEx site. So.
That is great. And we have very distinguished speakers.
Yeah, I see Mr. Henry is on the line, so welcome to him.
Yes,
main
welcome.
speaker.
Oh, wonderful. Putting us in the good mood from a user's perspective. And giving us the feeling that we are relevant. And Baird is and speaking.
Bert is with us. Bert is with us.
Okay. Hi, Sean. Did you have any last-minute questions in terms of guiding us through the event? Do you see my video going in and out? I seem on my screen, my video sometimes disappears and then it reappears. I don't, for no apparent reason.
No, it seems fine.
From your side? Okay, good. I don't have to see myself. I know how I look like, unfortunately. But I think I just when I summarize or when we speak at the end, good.
Okay, so we have all the panelists on the call, so that's good. So we can wait a few minutes and then we can start.
Good morning and thank you to all the panelists. We should, I think, always at these events almost run a little side statistics on the time zones that we are. Bert sends a message that he cannot unmute. No, we should help him with that. No, I was just saying we should run with these events a little time zone statistics on how many time zones we are actually covering here. Who is the earliest bird and who is the latest person? Who is, just to give us a really sense of the globality of these events.
Bert, could you try unmuting again right now?
Is it Bert now?
Yes, Bert,
wonderful. Thank you.
we can see you and hear you, and you are bright in the early morning here.
Yeah, I had my coffee. Good morning to you all.
That is very important. I mean, I think my professional performance is directly correlated with the amount of coffee that I take in the early morning.
Right. Pete, could you unmute yourself to test your microphone?
Yeah, I think I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, Pete, we
Yes.
can hear you, and that is always a wonderful thing when we can hear you.
And to help you with your survey, Stefan, it's 11:30 at night here in Australia. So we probably get the record for the latest. But if there's anyone from New Zealand, it's 1:30 in the morning in New Zealand, so they might be the earliest.
day 1:30 and we have 7:30 in New York, but it could be that if there's somebody from Mexico, there would be a 6:30. And I'm sure there was great interest from the INEGI. I believe there's a big delegation from the INEGI.
Yep. Ken, can you also unmute so that we make sure that you can speak?
Yeah. Can you hear me? I've unmuted. Am I coming through?
We
Okay.
can hear you.
Good.
Yeah. Thanks.
Well, I'm also on the east coast of Australia, but I'm at my daughter's place in the state of Queensland, which does not observe daylight saving time, and so it's only 10:30 at night here. So there you are, Ben.
Yeah.
Sorry, Herman, we couldn't hear you.
Herman, your mic went offline.
Okay, whether there's a link for attendance.
What about now?
Yeah, now we can hear you again, Herman. Yes, thank you.
Herman,
you
someone is asking whether there's a link for attendance. I don't understand.
No.
Herman, I believe you were saying you were giving us as good statisticians, you were giving us numbers of how many people are currently connected.
What about now?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Yes, I see Pete nodding. I also just saw somebody texting from Mexico, so we definitely have somebody in the 6:30 morning slot, so that they will probably win that prize.
Stefan, Herman's having a bit of a issue with his mic. He messaged us. We can begin the meeting. We can begin the webinar if you can launch it for us.
Okay, then I'll do that. You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So we do what we always do when we come together globally in these kind of events. We improvise a little bit. So my name is Stefan Schweinfest. I'm the director of the Statistics Division of the United Nations in New York. I'm greeting you from here. Actually, my dear colleague and friend Herman Smith was supposed to speak the opening words here because he is leading our program on national accounts. And of course, he has done an amazing job from our side to steer this process over the last now 5 years. We're coming to the grand conclusion of a big global statistical effort. And today we have this webinar to bring us all together and to bring all of you up to date on where exactly we are. And we have very distinguished speakers. So I will just leave it at saying hello this morning and then turn it over to my dear colleague and friend Haishan Fu, the director of the Data Development Program and Group in the World Bank and current chair of the Intersecretariat Working Group on National Accounts, who is globally steering this effort. I think in terms of housekeeping, Herman was just about to say that the meeting will be recorded. We will also encourage you to mute your microphones if you are not speaking to ensure the quality of sound. And then we will see, to the extent of the time management, whether we have time for questions, but please also feel encouraged to use the chat and type in your questions. And even if we cannot respond to your questions in this event, this is of course part of a bigger process leading up to our Statistical Commission in 1 month in New York, a little bit more than a month. And if there are serious questions, this is of course the moment to address them. So rest assured, if you type something in the chat, even if we can't answer it during this event, we will certainly as a secretariat look at everything. So with these preparatory short welcome words, hand over to Haishan, who will chair our meeting this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stefan, and a big warm welcome to all of you to this webinar on the road to the UN Statistics Commission 2025. I have been told there are over 1,000 people registered for this event, clearly showing the enthusiasm for this very relevant and important topic. So as the current chair of the UN Statistics Commission's Intersecretarial Working Group on National Accounts, it's really great pleasure to help moderate this event and welcome all of you. I must say right at the start, this SNA update process has been led by a joint leadership group across the important agencies. So it's really on their behalf I'm doing this today. I think we will be focusing on, as the title of the event made it very clear, on the new system of national accounts 2025. It's really a new set of statistical standards for economic accounting, economic measurement, reflecting on the ongoing global economic transformation, while setting the standard for the future. So I'm just really proud to see how this project has been coming together. We're actually really at a critical moment. We all know that at the upcoming Statistics Commission session in early March, the Commission will be considering the endorsement of the new SNA 2025 menu, and this reflects a tremendous effort over the last few years, as Stefan pointed out, with discussions on the scope of the update starting in 2018 and moving to the establishment of task teams and a tremendous effort of all the experts involved during the pandemic through a really extraordinary effort working on this, and that led to this point we are now at. And in today's meeting, we have three objectives in mind. First, we want to reflect on the policy relevance of the national system of national account in this, as I mentioned, fast evolving global context. We also want to highlight the motivation for the new measurement to be introduced through the 2025 version of the system of national account, including developments such as globalization, digitalization, and strengthening the linkages with broader measures of well-being and sustainability. And at the same time, we also want to give everyone a quick update on the process so far and what's being expected from the upcoming commission and beyond. I'm just really glad to join three distinguished speakers. Each of them will have about 20 minutes to highlight their perspective. So without further ado, let me just get into that. We have our first speaker, Mr. Ken Henry, who is an Australian economist and public servant, formerly the Secretary of Treasury. Ken will be discussing the need to ensure the SNA remains highly relevant from the policy perspective. We will then have my colleague, Chief Statistician Data Officer and Director of the Statistics Department of IMF, Mr. Bert Croix, who will be talking about introducing to you what motivated the development of new measurement and standard in the new version of the SNA. And then we will also have our dear colleague, Pete Hopper, who is the project manager of this huge initiative, give us the sense of where we're heading. So with that, let me first invite Mr. Ken Henry to get us started.
Well, thank you very much. And can I thank you for the opportunity to speak to such a distinguished audience on such an important topic. Yes, indeed, 2025 SNA is a very impressive piece of work. I would say that its widespread adoption will give renewed hope to many policy advisors and policymakers all around the world who have good reason to be somewhat disillusioned by a couple of decades now of poor governance and poor decision-making, not in all countries, but in most. And the stakes could scarcely be higher. I'll concentrate my remarks on the relevance of the SNA to matters of well-being and sustainability. That's not because I consider the work on digitalization and globalization to be any less deserving, simply that the sustainability of human activity is something that I think should be keeping all of us awake at night. The SNA is an economic construct, of course. Its conceptual foundations are derived from Keynesian economics' focus on the determinants of short-term aggregate demand, driven by the experience of the Great Depression, at least initially. Ingeniously, it manages to match aggregate demand with production-based data and with data concerning incomes, and it all adds up, even if we need to use statistical discrepancies to do some of the work for us. Whilst having been developed principally to help operationalise Keynesian's short-term aggregate demand management, the set of national accounts also provides data for those interested in things like capital accumulation, labour productivity and economic growth. And it provides an internally consistent set of aggregate industry-specific and sectoral accounts for input, output and computable general equilibrium modelling. And I have some experience, considerable experience really, of using the accounts in each of these ways to support policy development. This is the bright side of the story, but there's also a dark side. And whilst it's been reasonable for some decades largely to ignore the latter, that can no longer be the case. The dark side needs bright illumination. Keynesian economics is not concerned with everything that matters unless you find yourself in a global financial crisis or something similar. In October 2008, as we in Australia were beginning to appreciate the enormity of the crisis engulfing major developed economies, I provided the most senior ministers in the Australian government with something of a seminar in elementary Keynesian demand management. We went through it, you know, C plus I plus G plus X minus M, put the algebra up on a board. Which components were at most immediate risk? We asked. What could government do to protect those components or offset their negative impacts, you know, compensate for those that were bound to fall? Nobody needed to stare at the algebra for too long to realise that C, household consumption, was the thing that should be getting the most attention. And that's why the Australian government at the time was advised to go early, go hard and go to households. And it worked. We avoided 2 successive quarters of negative real GDP growth. This is a bright side story. Economists are interested in the management of economic crises because of their impacts on people's lives. In what's becoming generally accepted language amongst public policy economists these days, one might say their impact on well-being. And when it comes to people's well-being, macroeconomic volatility can be, indeed usually is, a matter of primary importance. For example, most older workers who lost their jobs in the recession of the early 1990s in Australia never had the opportunity to work another day in their lives. But macroeconomic volatility is not the only matter of concern. More generally, in recent decades, analysts and public policy decision makers have been keen to understand what's happening to other things that impact people's well-being and what's happening to people's well-being over time. Is well-being improving, stagnating, or even deteriorating? The SNA has never pretended to enable measurement of something this challenging, even though these are obviously the more important questions. Because national accounts based on the SNA are the most impressive sets of economic and financial accounts that exist for policymakers, and especially because they provide an aggregate assessment of something obviously relevant to people's lives, captured in a single metric like real GDP or real GDP per capita, they present a temptation for misuse amongst analysts, policymakers, and commentators. The misuse of the SNA in making assessments about the well-being of people in all nations has now become a serious problem. Of course, I can understand a product label defence from national accounts statisticians. Some of you will want to say that it's not your fault that people misuse your product, but you do know that your product is being misused. Moreover, you should know that its misuse is causing great harm, that it has contributed to the emergence of several crises confronting humanity, crises that I would suggest are far more serious than the tragic human costs of an economic recession, even the Great Depression. I'm referring, for example, to climate change due to dangerous atmospheric concentrations of greenhouse gases caused principally by land clearing for agriculture and the burning of fossil fuels to power industry and transport and to generate heating and electricity for households. And I'm referring to the crisis affecting nature more generally, a widespread loss of biodiversity, of habitats, of critical ecosystems, and of course, widespread species extinction. Today, this loss of natural capital poses an existential risk to businesses, economies, and financial systems everywhere on Earth. Accumulated stores of material and financial wealth are exposed to nature risks so extreme as to be uninsurable. Human cultures, livelihoods, and lives are being lost. Reflecting on the history of the past 70 years, I think it reasonable to conclude that the SNA has permitted policymakers to achieve aggregate economic outcomes far better than what would otherwise have been achieved, even though it's clearly not prevented numerous economic and financial crises over that period. But I also think it reasonable to conclude that the lack of data concerning the condition of natural capital, prepared on a basis that mirrors the rigour of the SNA, with its detailed supply and use tables, balance sheets, and so on, that this goes a long way to explaining why humanity is now confronting a series of crises of far greater importance. Keynesian economics, of course, has no need of any concept of capital. Economic, financial, human, social, or natural. Even in respect of economic capital, neither its accumulation nor depreciation is really of any interest, only gross investment, the thing that we have been calling gross fixed capital formation. In the conduct of Keynesian macroeconomic management, net domestic product has no place of interest to a policy person. This makes sense if the purpose of public policy is merely to guard against or manage short-term macroeconomic shocks. But if the same aggregate measures are used to make inferences about economic development or longer-run economic performance, well, then we have a problem. Relying upon real gross domestic product as a measure of human development supports large-scale deforestation for timber and agriculture. It supports the rapid depletion of all other natural resources, and it supports the burning of fossil fuels without regard for the longer-term consequences of any of these things. This is not a problem peculiar to Keynesian economics, by the way. In standard neoclassical growth models, it's clearly important to understand the difference between the gross and the net rates of accumulation of economic capital and of course, the role played by technology. But that's about it. and that's not much. In all mainstream models of economic development, Keynesian, neoclassical, even Marxist, natural constraints on human activity are simply ignored. If the discussion could not be avoided, economists would usually insist that technology will fix it somehow. And yet, as Partha Dasgupta puts it, and I'll quote, "No amount of technological progress can make economic growth as conventionally measured an indefinite possibility. Ours is inevitably a finite economy, as is the biosphere of which we are part." If we're interested in the sustainability of humanity, and we'd better be, then we'd better stop ignoring the state of the natural world of which we are part. So let's go to basics. Human progress has relied upon modes of industrial production, including agricultural practices, that have in turn relied upon the extraction of non-renewable raw materials like iron ore, coal and gas, and the absorption of a stream of ecosystem services derived from things like pollinating birds and insects, sources of fresh water, forests, marine life, arable soils, and various natural waste absorbers. Of course, these are not the only means of production. Both non-renewable raw materials and the natural capital that generates a flow of ecosystem services, these things are gifted by nature. The stock of natural capital exhibits an extraordinary degree of geological, hydrological, and biological diversity. That part of the stock of natural capital from which ecosystem services emerge has a regenerative quality. It's renewable, though in a manner and at a rate determined by nature itself, not by us. The extraction from the geosphere of non-renewable natural resources for industry has depleted the stock of natural capital directly, but it's also had an indirect impact. Most obviously, the burning of fossil fuels has damaged the atmosphere, the hydrosphere, and the biosphere in a set of complex processes that we refer to as climate change. And those are not the only contributors to the degradation of natural capital. Because the industrial rate of absorption of ecosystem services has exceeded the regenerative capacity of nature, at least for a couple of centuries now, the stock of natural capital has been depleted, just as machines used in production depreciate more rapidly if worked harder and not properly maintained. The depletion of natural capital implies a diminishing capacity over time to supply ecosystem services critical to production. For example, soil fertility, the availability of well-hydrated farming land, and the waste absorption capacity of the atmosphere and the biosphere, these things have fallen over time. A degraded biosphere, we are discovering to our great cost, affords less protection from fire, from droughts, from floods and storms. All of these things are growing in incidence and severity because of human-induced atmospheric change. It's at least conceivable that as the stock of natural capital is depleted, the production of goods and services might continue to expand for a time because of new technologies invented by humans and because of increases in the means of production, both capital and labour, also sourced from humans. But none of the human ingenuity that we've seen, nor capital accumulation, nor even increasing work effort has thus far done anything to halt the rate at which the stock of natural capital is being depleted. To the contrary, new technologies and more capital-intensive modes of production appear to have accelerated its rate of depletion, and they've done little to reduce the dependence of industry upon the stock of natural capital. For several decades now, going at least as far back as the Limits to Growth publication of the Club of Rome in 1972, serious people have been challenging the notion that the transformation of non-renewable resource stocks into products for human consumption can continue indefinitely, generation upon generation. Surely they've been arguing at some point the stock of natural capital must become so diminished as to be incapable of permitting humans to meet even their most basic needs. Joe Stiglitz's seminal 1974 paper exploring patterns of economic growth with exhaustible natural resources appears to have convinced most economists that we need not worry, though I doubt that was his intent. The fact of there being finite stocks of non-renewable raw materials could safely be ignored, they concluded. Only modest rates of technological progress would be required to sustain indefinite growth. assuming, of course, intertemporal efficiency and resource consumption. Well, try telling that to the people of the Republic of Nauru. Once boasting one of the world's highest levels of GDP per capita, its stores of commercially accessible phosphate were exhausted by the 1990s. Today, it's among the world's poorest nations. Some contemporary commentators describe Nauru as a client state of Australia. That's ironic. Today, Australia is among the world's major suppliers of iron ore, coal and natural gas. Exports of these commodities make up about 2/3 of Australia's total exports by value. 20 years ago, mining contributed about 5% of Australia's gross domestic product. Today it contributes about 15%. Australian media commentators and most of the nation's politicians appear to believe that mining underpins Australian prosperity, even though it employs only about 2% of the labour force, and most profits are remitted to non-resident shareholders. Australia is at risk of its very own Nauru moment. In avoiding such an outcome, the 2025 SNA could play a powerful role. It proposes that much greater emphasis be given to net over gross measures of output, that net measures take account not only of depreciation, but also of resource depletion, and that national income, rather than domestic product, be promoted as the key economic aggregate. Accounting properly for the exhaustion of non-renewable resources is important, but also accounting properly for the critical role played by ecosystem services derived from nature. There's an emerging consensus that past patterns of degradation of the natural world have set up long-running dynamic adjustments with complex and powerful feedback loops that will take many generations to settle down. It's even possible that those dynamic processes initiated by past events will never settle down, that they are explosive. The Earth we inhabit presents us with a set of immutable biophysical constraints, in some places these days referred to as planetary boundaries. These relate not merely to the stocks of non-renewable resources that have historically been used to support industrial activity. More particularly, they concern a set of ecosystem services we've been taking for granted. And unless our industrial processes demand less from the stock of natural capital than its replenishment, there must come a time when production collapses. With growing evidence of proximity to ecological tipping points, we should have been allowing for the possibility that the fall in production could be both imminent and catastrophic. Recent meetings of global forums concerned with the state of biodiversity evidence a realisation that we need to invest in new models of human progress. In many parts of the world, this new model of human progress is being labelled nature positive. While the model is yet to be developed in detail, nature positive argues that for some time, perhaps generations, we must seek to restore environmental condition. And that means we'd better start measuring it. Restoring environmental condition implies reshaping human systems and processes to economise on the demand for ecosystem services so that industrial absorption falls below natural rates of regeneration. It means holding other processes that degrade the stock of natural capital from which those services are drawn, and it means beginning rebuilding what has been lost. That's one reason for wanting to venture with considerable energy and ambition well beyond GDP. But there are other reasons, bigger, broader reasons, and let me spend just a minute or two on this topic. 20 years ago, in articulating the meaning of its mission to improve the well-being of the Australian people, the Australian Treasury, which I was leading at that time, borrowed heavily from Amartya Sen's conceptualisation of development as freedom. We used to describe the Treasury's mission in these terms, that all Australians have the capabilities, one might think of these capabilities as freedoms and opportunities, to choose a life that they have reason to value, and that future generations of Australians enjoy an even richer set of capabilities. This framing embeds Robert Solow's 1991 construction of sustainability as a moral obligation to conduct ourselves so that we leave to the future the option or the capacity to be as well off as we are. Because well-being is a considerably more capacious concept than human needs, that framing goes beyond both the better-known Brundtland Commission's 1987 Statement on Sustainable Development and also the Rio Earth Summit's conceptualisation 5 years later, both of which concentrate on human needs. And Amartya Sen has also taken issue with restricting the focus to mere needs. High integrity measures of natural capital would greatly assist policymakers get their heads around an important distinction that about which there's much confusion following the Rio Earth Summit, to do with humanity's ability to trade off economic, social and environmental amenities against one another. The policy landscape of relevance to a mission focused on well-being is vast. I won't go through because of limitations of time what we focused on 20 years ago when we developed our own set of well-being policy indicators, except to say that what we came up with does bear a striking resemblance to that developed by Stiglitz, Sen and Fitoussi in the 2009 report of the Commission on the Measurement of Economic Performance and Social Progress, and I would imagine that most people attending this seminar are very familiar with that framework. Clearly, policymakers concerned with well-being must venture well beyond GDP and GDP per capita. And of course, the present SNA contains other measures relevant to well-being that are within the SNA sequence of economic accounts already, including things like net national income, household disposable income, household consumption, and the distribution of these things. But these concepts are also seriously deficient. They're good, but they are deficient if one's interest is in well-being. On the other hand, the connection between the capabilities perspective that I've emphasised and the capitals approach emphasised in the 2025 SNA, that connection is both strong and immediate. I would put it this way: the capabilities enjoyed by citizens are underwritten by national endowments. Some of these national endowments are a consequence of nature. They're components of natural capital. Others have been developed by earlier generations of humans. These include economic capital, both physical and financial, but also human capital, dependent upon investments in education and health facilities in particular, and of course social capital, in most countries a product of foundational investments in things, well, Indigenous cultures, modern multiculturalism, the visual and performing arts, legal and regulatory structures, governance, policy frameworks that promote freedom and economic security, and of course working conditions that support human dignity. Students of international trade theory appreciate the role played by national endowments, both natural and human created, in determining the pattern of trade, but national endowments determine a great deal more than that. The nurturing of natural, economic, human and social capitals should be designed to expand opportunity and enhance the freedom of all people, including those not yet born, to choose a life they will have reason to value. In considering extensions to the SNA, that is venturing outside of the sequence of economic accounts, the 2025 SNA accords priority to those measures for which extended accounting treatments have been developed. That means supply and use tables, balance sheets, asset accounts, and the utilisation of both monetary and non-monetary metrics. This is a sensible approach. The SNA need not seek to measure all components of well-being. On the other hand, it must aim to provide a set of accounts that permit the interested user to get some sense of whether the well-being of citizens in a country is being enhanced over time, and at least to some extent, whether some countries are doing better than others in securing the well-being of their citizens. One of the themes that emerges strongly in chapters 34 and 35 of the 2025 SNA is the need to develop non-monetary metrics for various elements of well-being. I could say a lot about that, but in the interest of time, I'll skip over my prepared remarks. I can make them available. Let me then finish with some comments on the task for analysts. The 2025 SNA observes that whilst national statistical agencies should be motivated to produce data about the quantity, quality, condition, and where possible, monetary values of the various capitals using a common methodological framework, it must be for analysts to assess the implications for well-being of changes in the composition of the capitals. Of course. But bear in mind that the very reason we're here today is that we share a deep sense of dissatisfaction with the assessments presently being made of the implications for well-being of data currently being provided. National statisticians must have some interest in the meaning that's being made of the data they compile and which they disseminate. And so, while I accept that there must be a boundary somewhere that separates the statistician from the policy analyst, I also think it important that the statistician have a clear sense of both the policy relevance and context of the data being disseminated. Indeed, the history of the SNA speaks loudly to this point. In considering the boundary between statistician and policy analyst, where, for example, might you choose to locate people like Colin Clark, Simon Kuznets, Richard Stone, and James Mead? The thoughtful presentation in chapters 34 and 35 of matters pertaining to well-being and sustainability is very much in the tradition of those early pioneers who contributed to what became the very first 1953 SNA. I can understand some national statisticians wanting to avoid the somewhat murky waters of moral and political philosophy, but I very much doubt that you can. Inevitably, beyond GDP is your program of work. Well, you will have gathered that I'm looking forward to the adoption of the 2025 SNA as the standard for national accounting. It contains very important changes that are necessary to ensure that the national accounts retain policy relevance. Today's policy analysts need better information, not only about the performance of the economy in a narrow sense, but also, and as a matter of urgency, about the relationship between economic performance and broader, more important issues of well-being and sustainability. Implementing the new SNA will bring its challenges, but earlier generations of statisticians have demonstrated a capacity to rise to such challenges, and I'm confident that today's statisticians are no less capable. You will need to invest considerable resources and commitment, but I very much hope that you'll see this as an essential investment, one that ensures that the national accounts remain at the forefront, continuing to provide the most meaningful statistics to help address the big issues confronting humanity. Your investments will build on a grand tradition of collaboration amongst national statisticians established over many decades that has helped build a better world. In that endeavour, I must wish you all the best.
Thank you so much. I think on behalf of all of us on the statistical side, what a great honor to have you, Mr. Ken Henry, to join us and give us this insightful, candid, indeed profound and inspiring critique of the economic accounting systems, and reminding us what should be our real foundational grounding starting point for any improvement of economic accounting system, how we should be really reflecting on the broader well-being of human beings, their capabilities and their dignity, as well as the well-being of the planet with which we depend on, and interactions between the human actions and the planetary changes, and how we should reflect it in how we assess our progress and well-being. So this is just absolutely a pleasure to have you and to hear you. And I know most of people want to get your the transcript of your speech, so we will provide that. And I think what you just really outlined and challenged us is also a great turning point for me to turn to my colleague Bert, who will be really addressing how the statistical community is trying to indeed respond to some of those challenges that you put forward in front of us. So let me turn to Bert. Floor is yours. Sorry for the barking. I think even our cat and dog have been very quietly listening and now getting excited. Please, Bert.
Thank you. Hi, Sean. Can you hear me and see my presentation?
I hear you, and we can also see your presentation on the screen.
Wonderful. Always happy if the technology works. Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's my pleasure to be here today to discuss what is in the new SNA and briefly touch upon the corresponding updates in the Balance of Payments manual. For the first time in history, the Balance of Payments and National Accounts communities are updating the standards presenting in the manuals in a fully coordinated fashion, including some jointly drafted chapters, such as the one on globalization. And in addition, strong linkages have been established with the government finance, monetary and financial statistics, and environmental economic accounting communities to ensure these perspectives were considered during the development of the new standards. This was really a global effort that was undertaken in close collaboration with compilers and users from different countries and international organizations. And there has been extensive involvement of country experts through participation in the task teams and global consultations. And this approach ensured that inputs from all regions were considered, and in particular, it's important to ensure that a global perspective was taken on the trade-off between analytical benefits from introducing revisions, but also the cost of implementing them. That, of course, is an issue for all statistical institutes. So the update addressed important data gaps in the areas of digitalization and financial innovation, globalization, but also well-being and sustainability that we heard so much of in the previous speech by Ken. So what's the agenda for today? I'll cover the motivation for the updates of the standards and summarize the key update themes. I will also show how the updates are expected to improve economic analysis and strengthen the data foundation for policy decisions, and I'll end up with a few concluding remarks. So all the items listed on this slide rose to prominence after 2006. And that was well after decisions regarding the 2008 SNA and Balance of Payments 6 update has been determined. So many of the decisions taken then are 18 years old. In fact, the word digital was only used twice in the 2008 SNA, and that was only in reference to digital cameras. So it's completely clear that the global economy has evolved significantly since then, and our statistics need to keep up with that to be able to have our users get the right insights in the economy and make good policy decisions. So since the existing versions of the macroeconomic statistical standards were introduced in 2008, 2009, there have been tectonic shifts in the global economy, increasing digitalization, financial innovation and globalization have exposed shortcomings in analytical usefulness of statistics. And as was mentioned by Ken, in 2008 global financial crisis, which occurred after these standards were finalized, highlighted new issues and limitations in macroeconomic data. Also, the pandemic has shown how interconnected our economies are. And as mentioned before, there's growing discussion about moving beyond gross domestic product, beyond GDP, to find alternative measures that portray more inclusive and also some more sustainable measures of economic growth. This all has presented a number of challenges to data compilation, and these challenges have been magnified in cases where digitalization, financial innovation, and globalization are intertwined. Further, when the standards were finalized in 2009, there were some outstanding conceptual and practical issues that required additional consideration. A lot of work has been done since then. Also, a number of high-level groups have given input for reviewing macroeconomic statistics. In 2009, the G20 asked the IMF and the Financial Stability Board to identify data gaps and to develop proposals for strengthening data. This resulted in the establishment of the G20 Data Gaps Initiative, now in its third phase. This was a lot motivated by the global financial crisis. The Stiglitz V2C Commission was established in 2008 to identify the limits of GDP as an indicator of economic performance and social progress, and to consider alternative indicators. So the aim of the update of SNA and Balance of Payments Manual was to ensure that macroeconomic statistics remain relevant and accurately capture all aspects of the economy. So what are the key update themes? Well, first, of course, the digital revolution. This is covered in the jointly written chapter in the 25 SNA and BPM 7. Since 2009, we have seen an increased prevalence of new transformative digital technologies, but during this same time period, many advanced economies also show a slowdown in productivity growth. And this led to some criticize that the slowdown in productivity was a problem of mismeasurement and not a true slowdown. And this was part of the impetus for including digitalization as a major theme in the SNA and Balance of Payments update process. The idea is that getting more insight in the impact of digitalization on the economy is crucial to explain and analyze this. One another topic is data. We all live in a world of data. The 25 SNA will expand the asset and production boundary so that the production of data can be treated as investment and hence contribute to GDP. For example, work that a data scientist does to extract data, clean, validate, and append the records in a database. And there's also growing importance of crypto assets and the need to provide country guidance how to consistently record them. This is also one of the drivers behind the update process. The proposed treatment is to record Bitcoin-like crypto assets, and those are crypto assets without a corresponding liability designed to act as a medium of exchange, as non-produced, non-financial assets, while crypto assets with corresponding liabilities will be treated as financial assets. And more importantly, to get insights, a key recommendation is for statistical compilers to include further breakdowns so that users have additional information. Measuring crypto assets is crucial from a public policy perspective because these assets can have significant implications for financial stability, tax policy, regulatory oversight, and more. So the SNA 25 recommends to quantify the impacts of digitalization more generally. The digital transformation is widespread and impacts a range of industries and products, including the related cross-border transactions. And to meet with these wide range of users' demands, the 25 SNA and BPM 7 recommends countries to develop a suite of indicators to make the digitalization of the economy more visible to users. An example is the digital industry, as shown in the graph, which is defined as the collection of a number of specifically digitally driven industries like ICT, intermediate platforms, etc., but also informational digital transactions and products. Since the global financial crisis, it's considered important to arrive at an improved accounting for financial risks and vulnerabilities. This was a major driver for the first G20 Data Gaps Initiative, as I said before. Again, one way to close this data gap is to provide further disaggregations and breakdowns. And that is why the 25 SNA and BPM 7 recommend additional breakdowns by financial instruments and by institutional subsectors. A special attention in all this is given to non-bank financial intermediation, like pension funds, insurance companies, other financial institutions. The idea is that having more granular information on the financial sector and their instruments, we can better assess risks and vulnerabilities. Then globalization, another major theme for the update of the standards. And it's also a joint written chapter in the SNA and Balance of Payments. Organizational rearrangements of multinational enterprises can have a significant impact on macroeconomic statistics. Statistical complications have long been recognized and discussed, and a lot of additional guidance has been developed since the release of the current manual 16 years ago. It's clear that there's friction between statistics based on residency and the global profit maximizing strategies of M&Es, and we need to deal that in the correct way for analysts to have useful information. And a featured part of the updates of SNA and BPM is the efforts to collect additional data on global value chains, multinational enterprises, and special purpose entities. First, providing more detailed data on activities of M&Es, key players in global value chains, will allow for a more refined analysis of M&E impact on the generation and distribution of income. So the SNA recommends in the institutional sector accounts to break down corporations into groups reflecting whether they are part of an M&E or not. And the groups are on the slide: foreign-controlled corporation, public corporations of each part of domestic M&Es, national private corporation of each part of domestic M&Es. Furthermore, having flexible, more detailed breakdowns through the extended supply and use tables and global value chain accounts will also enhance statistics that feed directly into multi-regional input-output tables, thus better illustrating the interconnectedness of economies and useful in policy work on trade, international taxation, and capital flows. Extensions may include breakdowns by firm, such as size class of the firm, trading status, for example, export orientation, or control, foreign control, domestic, units that are part of an M&E group. Also, special attention is given to SPEs. SPEs are typically set up in countries of convenience and low tax jurisdictions. These entities have long blurred macroeconomic statistics, since they are considered residents where they are incorporated or have their legal domicile, even though they have minimal activity or physical presence in that country. SPEs often have large balance sheets with most of their assets and liabilities vis-à-vis non-residents, and are usually set up to perform a specific role within the multinational enterprise group. Because of this size, the interpretation of macroeconomic statistics becomes more difficult when trying to understand real economic links between economies. As shown in the figure, SPEs account for a significant share of foreign direct investment in some economies. Most of the SPE positions are concentrated in a few offshore financial centers. And the updated standards were recommended for countries where these entities are important to delineate SPE activity separately from non-SPE activity, so their role in the economy can be better understood and analyzed. Then coming to well-being. The final major theme is well-being and sustainability. It's a new chapter in the 25 SNA. And there are a number of topics under this theme, hopefully getting in the direction that Ken was asking us to go. On the slide, you see a graph with a measure of the distribution of household disposable income. There's a need to go beyond measuring the size or growth in the economy to better understand who is benefiting and how income is distributed. The second G20 Data Gaps Initiative spearheaded efforts to compile estimates of the distribution of income across households. The number of economies compiling these data is expected to increase now the recommendations are part of the 25 SNA. Additionally, the third phase of the G20 Data Gaps Initiative features the production of the statistics as part of the new initiative. The new SNA also recommends other breakdowns of households and more detailed labor market statistics. And a number of additional extended thematic accounts and tables are described. For example, on unpaid household services that are not part of regular GDP. That's the non-market activity performed by households without monetary compensation. The result will be an expanded measure of economic activity that will make visible shifts in the production of services from market production to unpaid household production and vice versa. These estimates will not affect the main sequence of accounts, that's the core GDP measures, but will give important insights for policy making. Sustainability. We know that GDP is not a measure of well-being, and even as an economic statistic, it's incomplete. GDP focuses on the present and ignores the future. Luckily, the SNA includes a wealth of other indicators that can be used. And one of them is more focus on net measures. Net domestic product reflects more accurately the sustainability of national income and of future prosperity, as it subtracts the depreciation of capital from the value of production, and starting from 25 SNA, also subtract the depletion of natural resources as a cost of production. Not all countries have collected information. They need to measure annual depreciation accurately. Even so, the data that are available suggest that the average country's NDP is about 10 to 20% lower than its GDP. The graph shows in red bars the ratio of net value added to gross value added ratio, and the difference with NDP and GDP is taxes and subsidies. Also shown in the graphs as black diamonds, subtracting depletion of non-renewable natural resources may have a relatively small impact on NDP in most countries. But the additional requirement to account for depletion will have a greater impact of countries that depend heavily on mining and mineral extraction, as can be seen in the graph for Norway, Russia, and Saudi Arabia, subtracting around an additional 10 to 20% points according to IMF estimates. Important to note that these are just experimental estimates, don't to get into the indication of the effect and not official in any way. One of the goals of the update process was to achieve complementarity and consistency between the standards. And one of the important standards to comply with is the SIA Central Framework and the SIA Ecosystem Accounting, describing the relation between the economy and the environment. And that's done in a number of ways. And the idea is that this all leads to better accounting in the SNA of sustainability. Depletion as a cost of production in the net measures. National capital as a separate category in the balance sheets include both produced and non-produced assets in natural capital, but also recommend separate classification of emission permits. And the proposal is to treat those as financial assets with taxes on production recorded as surrender, valued as issue value. And there's a more focus on improving the estimation of natural resources. There's a lot of guidance in that. So concluding remarks. National accounts are more than just GDP. More detailed information than GDP is needed to better understand the complex nature of the modern economy. The SNA updates highlights additional breakdowns details to see different aspects and views of economic activity, providing the data for evidence-based policies in the modern economy. And the SNA also provides a lot of complementary information to GDP. Governments all over the world strive to grow their economies and raise their GDP. It's a measure of just how powerful statistics can be in the policy-making process. But we should not focus on one statistics at the expense of all others. Complementary measures that give a more complete picture of the economy and our planet's wealth and people's well-being deserve attention too. Examples of these complementary measures are net measures like NDP, in which depreciation and depletion are taken into account, as discussed in the previous slide. However, it's essential not to consider only indicators of economic activity, like GDP and NDP, but also broader measures of wealth. Greater wealth today allows us to enjoy higher consumption tomorrow. It raises living standards. A nation's wealth is more than just financial assets and physical capital. The new SNA makes a great step in the direction of promoting these complementary measures. Internationally agreed statistical standards alone are not enough to provide information. It falls to national authorities to compile the data that are comparable across countries and use them in the decision making. And this is just a lot of work. Many statistical agencies struggle to collect data and calculate national accounts that meet higher standards. Even as we move towards finalizing the 25 SNA, quite a few countries have yet to implement the previous update agreed 16 years ago in 2008. At the IMF, we are determined to overcome these challenges. We are working closely with other international institutions, national statistical agencies, and others to establish compilation guidance to implement the 25 SNA and BPM7. And through our capacity development activities aligned with the activity of others, in partnership with other institutions, we are helping countries produce more reliable and relevant estimates of GDP, balance of payments, IIP, and related statistics, so that all have the data they need to support good policies. So over the coming years, we will design a CD program to help countries implement the 25 SNA and BPM7. Thank you for listening, and hope to see many of you in New York in March.
Thank you very much, Bert, for highlighting the major effort went into this SNA update process to reflect some of the emerging measurement issues. Clearly, Mr. Ken Henry, you could see this is going to be an ongoing process for continuing to evolve and improve how we measure. And I'm also glad, Bert, you highlighted the critical challenge we're facing in terms of not just the measurement improvement, but also the data availability and also the importance of investing in the best data possible to address the measurement issues. So with that, let's turn to Pete, who will be giving all of us a quick update on the process so far and what's expected on our way to the Commission and beyond.
Thank you. I'm just going to get my presentation. This is proving to be somewhat challenging. I need to click on a particular.
Well, while you are doing that, I just want to let everyone know UNSD will make the both the presentation and the speech by Mr. Henry available. I'm sure also Pete's presentation.
Yes, which I am hoping is about to come up. Can you see my presentation? Can you see my screen?
It's up. It's up. Thank you.
And there you go. And it's now in full screen mode. And now I need to get that back to the start. Thank you. Thanks for bearing with me for a few minutes while I got this sorted out. This is always one of the challenges when you present using these platforms, that you can remember how to get your presentations up. But we have got this. As the other speakers have said, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you about the update of the SNA. Ken and Bert have given us a wealth of information about why we need the update and what the update contains. I'm going to talk a little bit about the process associated with the update, the journey so far, and where we've got to go to from here. So the process for the update was initiated around about 2018 when the initial preparations for the update commenced, but formally the update process commenced in 2020 when the Statistical Commission requested that the ISWGNA submit for its consideration a roadmap for a revision of the 2008 SNA with the target date of 2025 for adoption by the Commission. And as we've heard, it was agreed at that time that the balance of payments in International Investment Position Manual would also be updated with a very similar target release date. In 2021, the Commission meeting endorsed the work program for the update of the 2008 SNA, and in early 2022, I was appointed as the project manager, and Peter van der Ven was appointed as lead editor. And I really want to take this point to emphasise the tremendous work that Peter has done as the lead editor. I think everybody who reads the 2025 SNA will be impressed by its quality, and that's been very much up to Peter and the work that he has done to produce a document of that standard. We've also been assisted by a 5-person editorial team of experts in various aspects of national accounting, and as well as that, extensive support was provided in particular by the United Nations Statistical Division, as well as by other ISWGNA members. And from a governance perspective, the update is overseen by the ISWGNA with assistance by the Advisory Expert Group on National Accounts. So the update has 4 main features. The first is the technical research that's been undertaken on prioritised and other national accounts issues. And as we've already heard, this has involved many, many people from across international organisations, national statistical organisations across the globe, and also from people outside the official statistical system, such as those from academia. And again, I would like to take this opportunity to thank everybody who has contributed to the update process. I'm sure if we were able to add up all the person hours that has been involved across the world, there'd be thousands and thousands of hours of work that have gone into the update. A second key feature of the update process is to ensure the coherence with other macroeconomic statistics standards. The third feature of the update process was the broad consultation on the issues associated with the update, and importantly ensuring that there's transparency in decision making. And lastly, we've had a program of experimentation and testing of selected recommendations and significant work on the development of implementation guidance. And I'll talk about all of these things in a little bit more detail later on in the presentation. We've heard of the priority areas for the update: wellbeing and sustainability, globalization, digitalization, financial innovation and sustainability. But in addition to that, the update considered issues relating to the communication of macroeconomic statistics, Islamic finance, the informal economy, and selected other issues. So quite a comprehensive program of work associated with the update process. As I said, the update has proceeded in parallel with the update of the balance of payments and international investment position manual. And as a result, for the first time ever, these two documents will be fully harmonised. We've also had extensive involvement in the update process from the custodians of Government Finance Statistics Manual, the Monetary and Finance Statistics Manual, and the System of Environmental Economic Accounting to ensure that we achieve coherence across all the core macroeconomic statistics standards. And I note that each of these standards are either being in the process themselves of being updated or will be updated in the next few years. And as part of those updated processes, they will be harmonised with 2025 SNA and BPM7. And it's evident that having a harmonised set of macroeconomic statistics will greatly assist policymakers. And I think it's worthwhile noting that this has taken over 50 years to achieve this coherence and harmonisation across all of these statistical standards. We'd all be also familiar that there's been recent updates to the International Standard Industry Classification and the Central Product Classification. And those updates were also informed by the SNA update process to further ensure the coherence of macroeconomic statistics. In terms of how we dealt with the issues in the update process, 68 guidance notes with recommendations for the update were prepared by 10 task teams that have been set up to undertake the research phase of the SNA update. Reflecting the fact that we were working in parallel with the balance of payments manual update, some of the task teams were joint task teams. And importantly, a number of the recommendations that were developed as part of this process were tested with experimental estimation. Each guidance note was initially reviewed by the AEG and BOPCOM where relevant, and then they underwent global consultation. Following incorporation of feedback from the global consultation process, the guidance notes were subsequently endorsed by AEG and BOPCOM. But as well as that, there were other issues notes that were prepared addressing items on the 2008 SNA research agenda. These were prepared often in conjunction with the balance of payments manual update team and discussed by the AEG. And when these notes proposed substantive change to the SNA, they also underwent global consultation. So from this process of producing guidance notes and issues notes, a consolidated list of changes was prepared, and it also included changes that had previously been agreed by the AEG since the 2008 SNA, and that had been foreshadowed in various issues of the SNA news and notes. The consolidated list of changes themselves was subject to global consultation in August and September of 2023, with the list updated as a result of that global consultation process. and then that was submitted to the UNSC for its endorsement. The Commission discussed the proposed changes at its meeting in February 2024, a bit under a year ago, and it endorsed all the proposals for changes except for one relating to the treatment of marketing assets as produced assets, and the Commission requested that more work be done on measurement in regard to that particular aspect. The Commission meeting also highlighted the need to develop compilation guidance for those changes that either have a significant impact or require a significant effort to implement. So turning to the 2025 SNA itself, it consists of 39 chapters and 5 annexes, and that chapter structure was presented to the Commission in 2023, and it is harmonised with the chapter structure of BPM 7. 16 of those 39 chapters are new or significantly revised, including new chapters on national accounts and measuring wellbeing and sustainability, communicating and disseminating macroeconomic statistics, digitalization, globalization, Islamic finance, financial corporations, measuring wellbeing and measuring the sustainability of wellbeing. And as Bert mentioned, 7 chapters, joint chapters with the BPM 7, and the text in the 2 manuals will be essentially identical in regard to both of those chapters. But even in the chapters that aren't joint chapters, there's a lot of shared text between the SNA and the Balance of Payments manual, covering issues of relevance to both of those manuals. The remaining 23 chapters are similar in content to the corresponding chapters in the 2008 SNA. However, they've been updated to reflect the agreed recommendations for change. And it's also worth noting, I think, that the 2025 SNA contains a new annex on international standards for macroeconomic statistics and their linkages with the system of national accounts. So in terms of developing the chapters for the new and substantially revised chapters, annotated outlines were prepared in 2022, which was subject to global consultation. Building on the annotated outlines, the drafting of these chapters commenced in the middle of 2023. Each of the chapters was reviewed by the Advisory Expert Group and the IMF Committee on Balance of Payments Statistics where relevant, and then subject to global consultation on a chapter-by-chapter basis during 2023 and early 2024. The other chapters, the chapters that weren't new or substantially revised, they were updated in late 2023, early 2024, by taking the relevant 2008 SNA chapters and only making changes when necessary, in other words, to reflect the agreed changes to the SNA, and this was done in the form of track changes. They were reviewed by the AEG, but they did not undergo global consultation on a chapter-by-chapter basis. We had a complete draft of the 2025 SNA that was available from June 2024, and that complete draft went out for global consultation in a 3-month period, June to September 2024, and at the same time there was a parallel global consultation process for BPM 7. For the global consultation on the 2025 SNA, we received around about 1,300 comments from 63 respondents. Most of the responses simply expressed agreement with the material presented, but in addition to that, we received many useful comments that will make the 2025 SNA a better document. Some respondents sought detail beyond what would be appropriate for the SNA. If we took some of the comments on board, we might finish up with a manual that was 2,000 pages, which is a little bit long, or alternatively, they requested specific compilation guidance, which will be provided in supporting materials. Some respondents raised issues that went beyond the mandate for the update of the 2008 SNA, and those that are relevant have been added to the research agenda. A few respondents raised issues regarding the recommendations for changes to the 2008 SNA that had been endorsed by the Commission, But all those recommendations had already undergone extensive discussion and global consultation, and there were no new issues raised in the global consultation on the full draft of the SNA that would warrant a reconsideration of the recommendations that had already been endorsed by the Commission. The comments from the global consultation were considered by the AEG and BOPCOM where relevant, and that was at meetings held late October, early November. And following those meetings, the draft chapters have been subsequently updated with generally minor changes as a result of the feedback from that global consultation process. So we're now at the point of having a 2025 SNA for submission to the Commission for its adoption as the updated international standard for national account statistics. Don't jump up onto the Commission website and expect to see it at this very instance, but I would expect that by the end of next week that will be available on the Commission website as a background document for the upcoming Commission meeting. Following adoption of the 2025 SNA by the Commission, a white cover version of the manual in English will be made available on the project website. That manual will still require formal editing. However, it will give producers and users of national accounts immediate access to the updated international statistical standard. And we're looking to do this simultaneously with the release by the IMF of the white cover version of the updated balance of payments manual. Following the release of the white cover versions, formal editing and translation into the official languages of the United Nations will be arranged, and work on developing the digital version of the SNA will progress in 2025, and we hope to have that available sooner rather than later. A key feature of the update process has been the development of a common harmonised glossary across the two manuals, but we also anticipate that this glossary will eventually be used as a single glossary for all international macroeconomic statistics standards. Work commenced on developing the glossary during 2023, and the starting point was over 1,200 terms and definitions, which we took from the balance of payments and the system of national accounts, as well as the European system of accounts, as well as the government finance statistics manual, the monetary and financial statistics manual and population guide, the system of environmental economic accounts, some terms and definitions from the Bank of International Settlements, and from the IPSAS, which is the International Public Sector Accounting Standards. The glossary was reviewed by AEG and BOPCOM, who provided guidance in resolving issues. And again, because we want the glossary to be used across all macroeconomic statistics standards, it was also reviewed by the GFS, MFS and CE communities. That glossary has now been finalised. It will be translated as a priority because the translation of the glossary will underpin the translation of the updated SNA and balance of payments manual. And we'll also have a digital version of the glossary as an essential component of the digital 2025 SNA. An important feature of the update process has been outreach, and there's been significant outreach regarding the SNA update. I won't go through all the detail in this slide. These slides will be made available, but we can see there's been several regional webinars and forums devoted specifically to the update. There's been discussion of the SNA update at key regional meetings, presentations on the update at the World Statistical Congress. There was an important seminar in November 2022 hosted by Eurostat and UNSD on macroeconomic statistics for the future, and that focused on the update of the SNA. Webinar on a consolidated list of changes. There's a wealth of information on the UNSD website about the update process. The global consultation process on the guidance notes, the annotated outlines, the consolidated list of changes and the updated chapters was an important part of outreach. as well as various articles in the SNA news and notes on the update process, as well as regular reports to the Statistical Commission. In terms of implementation, and remembering that the Statistical Commission put emphasis on having high quality implementation guidance, work has been progressing on developing implementation guidance in a number of areas. This slide shows the high priority areas where we've been working on developing implementation guidance. For data as an asset, a Eurostat IMF task team has developed a handbook on measuring data in the system of national accounts, and that will be available as a background document for the Commission. For natural resources, and natural resources is just a simple phrase here, but there's a lot of issues associated with natural resources in the update. The OECD, with the assistance of an expert group, has done an exceptional job in preparing a guide entitled Measuring Natural Resources in the National Accounts Compilation Guide. An interim version of that guide is available, which will be a background document for the Commission. There will be global consultation on that guide with the aim of having it finalised by the end of 2025. Crypto assets of various types and how they're treated is another important feature of the update process. And the IMF is developing compilation guidance in this area, which is expected to be finalised by mid-2025. And one of the changes made in the update process was the inclusion of a rate of return on capital in the estimation of non-market production, and guidance on how that can be calculated has been developed. That was also subject to global consultation, and that will also be made available as a background document for the Commission. Looking more broadly at implementation, we've been working on developing an implementation strategy for the updated manuals. Initial ideas were developed in 2023 and discussed by the AEG and key stakeholders. In discussions, it was subsequently decided that it would be preferable to have a joint 2025 SNA BPM7 implementation strategy. That strategy was developed. It was discussed by the AEG and BOPCOM at their meetings in late 2024, and it's recently undergone global consultation. And the finalised implementation strategy will be presented at the 2025 UNSC meeting as a background document. And we're also aiming to have it endorsed by Bert as the IMF Chief Statistician in association with his responsibility for approving BPM7. The implementation strategy proposes a target window of 2029 to 2030 for implementing the updated manuals, but it recognises that this is dependent on adequate funding and resources. It's important to note an innovation by the IMF, which is the development of a compilers hub. The hub will be a digital global collaboration platform that will provide a user-friendly platform for the global statistical community to centralise and share knowledge, facilitate collaboration and host discussions. And we think that will be an important underpinning for the work associated with the implementation of the SNA and the updated balance of payments manual. And for example, the hub will provide a repository for all the implementation guidance that's already been prepared and will continue to be prepared, as well as an opportunity for countries to share their experiences with their work on implementing the manuals. In terms of the structure of the implementation strategy, it has 6 core elements. It recognises upfront that we need a strategic approach to implementation. The communication and outreach, including advocacy, is an important element of implementation. Training, as well as technical assistance and cooperation, are going to be key elements of successful implementation. The continued preparation of manuals and handbooks to support implementation, as well as ongoing research into various areas is also going to be important. To support those core elements, there are a range of modalities around planning, monitoring and evaluation, assessing the preparedness of countries for implementation to guide the planning, setting out the stages of implementation, looking at the timing of implementation around that 2029 to 2030 window, and looking at how the implementation will be coordinated and governed at the international level. The strategy also includes a model high-level implementation plan for countries, as well as a high-level plan for international organisations to support implementation. So in summary, I think there are a number of hallmarks of the update process. The extensive research that was undertaken into the issues on the agenda for the update, the extensive consultation that has taken place and will continue to take place, and the transparency of the update process, the close relationship with the BPM update and the involvement of the SIA, NFS and GFS communities to enhance the comparability across macroeconomic statistics standards, the development of guidance to support implementation and the development of the implementation strategy, as well as the outreach that has taken place and will continue to occur. So that provides a view on the journey so far and where we're going to continue on the journey, Haishan. Thank you very much for the opportunity to make the presentation. We've been talking about the road to the 2025 SNA. For those who may be interested, that is the road to Arakai or Mount Cook in New Zealand, which I think makes a beautiful picture to finish the presentation. So I will stop sharing my screen and hand back to you. Thank you very much, Haishan.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I can see that in the chat there are already some of technical questions being asked. I'm sure the guideline or guidance note will address some of those issues. So with that, let me turn to Stefan, the director of UNSD, to help conclude this event.
Thank you very much, Haishan, and thank you everybody. What a fantastic set of speakers. Ken, I really appreciate. I've never heard somebody find this wonderful balance between. I've heard alarmistic and hysterical presentations, and I have heard boring presentations that put you asleep. But I think you really found the middle ground of conveying the message with a sense of urgency, but a sense of it can be done if we all keep working together on this, and I really appreciate that message in the background. Beat, thank you for sending a strong message, I think, to everybody of the collegiality and coordination with which we at international organizations have been running this process, and for your commitment and support at the very end, that we all know that the writing of the SNA 2025 is only the first chapter. The second chapter now will start, and we will all continue to work together for the important implementation. And of course, Pete and Peter, our double Peter team, thank you so much for your presentation and your steady hands. And you've made the management of this process really very simple in a way. As managers, I was only worried when you were worried, and I was happy when you were happy. So we could trust you 1000% through this 5-year process, leading us. So we had at some point over 500 participants. So this is also remarkable. I think it's not only a webinar, it's actually a celebration of our global statistical and data family and a commitment for working together. And it's a fantastic opening for my Statistical Commission 2025 season, where we are all together. And just allow me for 30 seconds to say it's a little bit personal for me also. I started as a little national accountant in 1989 in the United Nations Statistics Division, and we were talking about the preparation for the 1993 SNA. And and I remember the first things I learned is we were printing all the SNA and the integrated sector accounts, and we're putting them on the walls, and we called them affectionately our bed sheets because it covered the entire wall. So that's how I learned my basics in national accounts. I think the SNA has been a success story of the United Nations and the global statistical community and professional community. And I really need to thank, of course, the colleagues in the intersecretarial working group. I mean, the World Bank, the IMF, OECD, and Eurostat. I think that group has been active since the 1980s. It already existed when I came to the UN. It's doing a lot of important management work in the background, fundraising. This was a major project also to steer and guide. And of course, you could see that we are also guiding the substantive integration. I mean, the degree of which UN standards and IMF standards, global standards are integrated at this moment is nothing short of historical. A big thank you to Pete and Peter. I already said it before. I mean, your steady hands have guided us through a 5-year process. Big thank you to my team under previously Ivo Havinkers and now Herman's guidance. I couldn't do anything without you guys. And of course, a big thank you to all of you. I mean, the international experts all around the world who've provided contributions. And so through the expert group and the global consultations and the task teams, let's just think back. This is a historical moment. We are building on the 1953 SNA. So that's 72 years. I'm not entirely sure whether there is anybody in this room today with the 500 people who is older than 72. I mean, so that means that our lifetime, we have all had the system of national accounts. It is a strong global standard. It's what we do at the UN. It's a norm, but it's not a straitjacket. It is a language that enables us to talk together and aggregate. But it also has its challenges, as we heard. We have done the effort to update the norm. I think the norm has lived so long because we were always aware that we need to update it, and we did that with the digital economy and globalization topics in mind. We are also very aware that this is a system. I always say my favorite letter in the SNA is the S, because it's a system, and I keep reminding people that the GDP is only the tip of the iceberg. I mean, and there is a lot of architecture underneath, and that will allow us to go beyond GDP as we have to, as Ken reminded us, and many people are requesting to better understand well-being, progress, and sustainability. But the SNA as a system has those tools, and we all need to become a little bit smarter in using them. And let me just at this moment share with you a joke that I sometimes make, because as a national accountant, I'm of course very fond of our GDP, and I don't like GDP bashing, but I understand its shortcomings. I always say it's a little bit like when you try to eat your soup with a fork. You cannot blame the fork because you're using the wrong instrument. But the good news is that the spoon has been invented. The statistical community has actually been working on this, and we have social and demographic statistics and environmental statistics, and we are working very strongly on this integration. So I think if we keep working together, I'm very confident that we will be able to live up to the challenges. What is next? The adoption, of course. I think Pete has made a strong case for adoption. I mean, but please reach out to your chief statisticians. The first step is really the formal adoption at the Statistical Commission. I know no system is ever perfect. There are and remain some legitimate concerns, but I mean, we have really thought about it, and it has been a very open and transparent process. So we hope at this point that the form that you will see in a week from now, and you got the information also in the chat, that we continue this dialogue and information sharing. So we are ready at this moment to adopt the 2025 SNA. And this is going to happen in 2 steps at the technical level. in the Statistical Commission session in the first week of March. But we also propose a resolution to take it to the political level, because we need the political commitment of the politicians to implement this global statistical norm, for international organizations to keep working together to support the implementation and the next steps. And so the resolution is a very short resolution. It's a page and a half, and we will share it with you and for review. And then we would be very grateful for two important steps. Please look at it, and if you have any questions and concerns, let us know so that we can facilitate negotiation process of this draft resolution during the Statistical Commission session, so that we can have a strong call at the end of the Commission session. So we would have two things. We would have the SNA itself, which is a book, of course, and the resolution which calls for its implementation over what will probably be another 15 years. So that takes us thinking in terms of history to about 2040. So let's think of our joint and global and common responsibility. But then, of course, two more important things are going to happen. As I said, the writing of the SNA is only the first chapter. The international organizations, we are committed to work then intensively on the implementation and on the research agenda, because no methodological reflection, the world does not stop. I was really smiling at Bert's reference to how much digital was referenced in 2008 and how quickly that changed. And we can all be sure that that will continue. So we will have a research agenda to look at evolving topics and so. So this is it for today. Thank you to all of you. It was a fantastic event and a fantastic opening. And I have more to offer. Let me, at the end, make a little bit of publicity. In 2 weeks from now, we will have exactly 2 weeks from now in this space. We will have a Statistical Commission webinar on the new census round, the global census round, and census recommendations. And just also think of the historical opportunity for a moment that we have here. This is the first time in history that the census round and the SNA, the new SNA, coincide in the same year, which will then mean that in these various areas we will all work on implementation efforts, and it's an enormous opportunity also for bringing our social and economic and demographic information systems closer together over the coming years. And also, as a statistical community, be ready for what will be inevitably a post-2030 development agenda of the United Nations. I think there is a really enormous, fantastic historical opportunity that we have, and we should grab it by the horns. So if in 2 weeks you want to connect to the census event, please do. If you have colleagues in your respective office who want to do that, please tell them. And then 2 weeks later, on the 19th of February, also as a Wednesday morning event, we will look at our Sustainable Development Goal indicator framework, how that has worked and how that will have to evolve in the future. So these are key topics for our Statistical Commission. So hi, Sean. I don't know. I see your name still there, whether you are there to formally close the event. If not, I know she texted me that she had to go to an important other appointment. So I started the event and I wasn't planning to, and I'm closing it and I wasn't planning to, but it just shows how we work together. So I wanted to thank you, thank the speakers, thank all of you for connecting. 500 people, we reached that number. It was phenomenal. And I'm wishing you a good rest of the day or good evening and night for everybody around the world. Thank you very, very much.